The road to Stalingrad, Hitler's ambition and early victories. In June 1941, Hitler unleashed Operation Barbarossa. This was a colossal gamble. The Nazi war machine now faced the vastness of Russia. Hitler's goal was to crush the Soviet Union quickly. He wanted to seize its resources. Initial German advances were stunningly successful. The Wehrmacht used blitzkrieg tactics with devastating effect. This involved rapid armored thrusts and overwhelming firepower. Soviet forces suffered massive losses. By summer 1942, Germans had advanced deep into Soviet territory. They reached the Volga River, a gateway to the oil-rich Caucasus. Hitler's attention became fixated on Stalingrad. The capture of Stalingrad held immense strategic and symbolic value. Taking the city would sever Soviet supply lines. It would also be a propaganda victory. The stage was set for one of the most brutal battles in history. The German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, spearheaded the assault on Stalingrad. Luftwaffe bombers pounded the city relentlessly, reducing much of it to rubble. This aerial bombardment was followed by a ground offensive, with German troops pushing into the suburbs. The Soviets, however, were determined to defend the city that bore their leader's name. They poured reinforcements into Stalingrad, turning every building, factory, and street corner into a defensive position. The fighting took on a brutal, close-quarters nature. Despite fierce Soviet resistance, the Germans gradually gained ground. Their superior firepower and tactics took a heavy toll on the defenders. By late September 1942, they had fought their way into the city center. The battle raged on, street by street, house by house. Hitler, obsessed with capturing Stalingrad, continued to pour men and resources into the fight. He believed victory was within reach, but the Soviets were far from finished. Under the leadership of General Vasily Chuikov, the Soviets adopted a strategy of tenacious defense. They knew they could not defeat the Germans in open warfare. Instead, they focused on close combat and urban warfare. Chuikov's orders were clear. We will defend every house, every floor, every room, every inch of Soviet soil. They turned the rubble-strewn city into a death trap for the invaders. Snipers, machine gun nests, and anti-tank teams inflicted heavy casualties on the Germans. One of the most iconic battles within Stalingrad raged for weeks over Mamayev Kurgan, a strategic hill overlooking the city. Both sides considered it vital and fought tooth and nail for its control. The hill changed hands multiple times in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile, across the Volga River, Soviet factories worked tirelessly to produce weapons and ammunition. Women and children labored around the clock, supplying the defenders with a lifeline. The Volga itself became a vital supply route. Boats under constant German bombardment ferried men, equipment, and supplies across the river. Section 4, turning the tide from urban warfare to Soviet encirclement. As the battle raged through the fall of 1942, the tide began to turn. The Soviets had a crucial advantage: manpower. They could replace their losses while the Germans were stretched thin. The harsh Russian winter set in, bringing with it freezing temperatures, blizzards, and unimaginable hardship. The Germans, ill-prepared for the brutal conditions, suffered terribly from frostbite and lack of supplies. On November 19, 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus. This was a massive counter-offensive that aimed to encircle the German Sixth Army inside Stalingrad. Two Soviet fronts smashed through the weak Romanian flanks north and south of the city. Within days, the Germans were trapped in a massive pocket. Trapped and facing annihilation, Paulus pleaded with Hitler to allow a breakout. Hitler refused, believing that the Luftwaffe could supply the encircled army by air. This proved to be a fatal miscalculation. Stalingrad's legacy, a turning point. The price of victory. Despite their desperate situation, the Germans continued to fight. Supplies dwindled, ammunition ran low, and starvation set in. Paulus surrendered on January 31st, defying Hitler's orders. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. It lasted 199 days, claiming 2 million lives. The German defeat marked a turning point in World War II. The initiative shifted to the Soviets. The victory came at a terrible cost. The city was devastated, yet it stood as a symbol of Soviet resilience and determination.